The key no longer fit. That was the first sign. For Clara Ellis, her life in the sun-drenched hills of Bel Air was perfect. A sprawling mansion, a handsome husband, Marcus Thorne, and a baby on the way. She thought she had it all. But on a Tuesday afternoon, standing in front of her own front door, with a useless piece of brass in her hand, she discovered her perfect life was a meticulously crafted lie. The house wasn't just locked, it was sold. And the man she loved, the father of her unborn child, was the one who had sold it right out from under her, leaving her pregnant, homeless, and with nothing but the designer clothes on her back. This isn't a fairy tale. This was the story of how one woman's world was shattered by the ultimate betrayal, and how her rescue came from the most unexpected and powerful man in the city. The Californian sun had a way of making everything look like a postcard. It gilded the marble entryway of the Thorne residence, made the azure water of the infinity pool sparkle, and cast long, dramatic shadows from the cypress trees lining the driveway. For Clara Ellis, this postcard had been her reality for the past 5 years. She'd married Marcus Thorne, the charismatic heir to the Thorne Legacy Corp. A man whose smile was as polished as his Italian leather shoes. Their life was a whirlwind of charity galas, weekend trips to Napa, and quiet evenings where the biggest decision was which Michelin-starred restaurant to order from. Clara, a talented art historian, had put her career on hold, believing she was building something more profound, a family. And now, at 29, she was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son. The nursery was almost complete. It was a masterpiece of muted earth tones, with a custom-built crib and a hand-painted mural of a gentle forest scene. Clara spent hours in there, folding tiny clothes, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly. But lately, a subtle chill had begun to seep into her perfect world, a draft coming from a crack she couldn't quite locate. Marcus was distant. He'd always been ambitious, but this was different. He'd come home late, smelling of expensive whiskey, and a faint, unfamiliar perfume. Something sharp and floral, nothing like her own subtle vanilla scent. He'd brush it off as client dinners and late-night strategy sessions. His phone, once left carelessly on the nightstand, was now perpetually in his pocket, screen down. Just a big deal at work, Ames, he'd said, last night, his eyes not quite meeting hers. It's taking everything I've got, but it'll all be worth it. For us. For the baby. She had wanted to believe him, desperately. She blamed her unease on pregnancy hormones, the nesting instinct making her overly sensitive. That Tuesday, she'd gone for her routine obstetrician appointment. The doctor, a warm woman named Dr. Lena Hansen, had shown her the baby's strong heartbeat on the ultrasound monitor. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was a powerful anchor in the swirling sea of her anxieties. Filled with renewed hope, she'd stopped at a boutique on Rodeo Drive and bought a tiny pair of sneakers, a ridiculously extravagant purchase that made her smile. She pulled her white Range Rover into the familiar driveway at 3 in the afternoon, humming along to the radio. And that's when she saw it. Stuck into the manicured lawn, just to the right of the prize-winning rose bushes, was a sign. A real estate sign. It was bold red, and had one word that made the air rush from her lungs: sold. For a moment she thought it was a prank, a tasteless, elaborate joke by one of Marcus's wealthy friends. She parked the car, her heart beginning a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with her baby's steady beat. She walked to the sign, touching the cold, impersonal plastic. Sold by Sterling Properties. She didn't recognize the name. A wave of nausea sharper than any morning sickness she'd experienced washed over her. She fumbled in her Hermes purse for her keys, her hands shaking. She walked up the stone steps to the heavy oak door she had walked through 1,000 times. She slid the key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. She tried again. Nothing. It was as if the lock had been changed. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her denial. She pressed the doorbell, the familiar chimes echoing strangely from within the silent house. No one answered. She knocked her fist, thudding against the solid wood. Marcus. Is anyone home? Her voice was thin, fragile. She pulled out her phone to call him, but a black Rolls-Royce Ghost purred up the driveway and came to a stop behind her Range Rover. The driver's side door opened and Marcus got out. He was dressed in a tailored Tom Ford suit, looking every bit the powerful executive. But his face was a cold, unreadable mask. The passenger door opened and a woman emerged. She was tall and stunningly beautiful with raven hair and a predatory grace. She wore a tight crimson dress that screamed money and ambition. Clara recognized her from a society event months ago. Isabella Vance, a notoriously aggressive real estate developer. Isabella leaned against the car, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face as she looked at Clara, then at the house. Marcus. What is going on? Clara's voice trembled. Why can't I get in now? What is that sign? Marcus walked towards her, his footsteps echoing in the terrifying silence. He didn't look at her belly. He didn't look at her face. He looked at a point just over her shoulder. The house is sold, Clara, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. It was the voice of a stranger. Sold. She repeated the word, tasting like ash. What do you mean, sold? This is our home. The baby's nursery is... My house is sold, he corrected her, his tone sharp. It was always my house, a pre-marital asset. My lawyers made sure of that. The prenup, a document she had signed without much thought, blinded by love and trust. Her own father had warned her, but she had dismissed his concerns as old-fashioned. But why a tear finally broke free and traced a hot path down her cheek. We're having a baby, Marcus. He finally met her gaze, and what she saw there horrified her. There was no love, no remorse, only icy contempt. Plans change. Isabella and I are together now. We're moving forward. Isabella pushed off the car and glided towards them, her arm linking possessively with Marcus's. She looked Clara up and down, her gaze lingering on the swell of her stomach with a flicker of distaste. Don't look so shocked, darling. Isabella purred, her voice like velvet laced with poison. You didn't really think a man like Marcus would be tied down forever, did you? Some of us offer more than just a domestic purpose. The insult hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Clara felt like she'd been slapped. My things, our wedding photos, the baby's room. She stammered, her mind racing. Your personal effects are in storage, Marcus said, dismissively pulling a card from his wallet. The details are here. My assistant will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. We'll be generous, of course. A settlement. He tried to hand her the card, but her hands were numb. She couldn't take it. Generous. She whispered, the full weight of the betrayal crashing down on her. You sold our home. You're leaving me while I'm carrying your son. You're throwing us away. Don't be so dramatic, Clara. He snapped, his composure finally cracking. You're not the first woman to get a divorce. I've deposited $50,000 into your account. That should be more than enough for you to find a new place and get settled before before. He couldn't even say the word baby. Get off the property, Clara, he said, his voice turning hard. The new owners are arriving shortly. It's no longer your concern. He turned, and with Isabella clinging to his arm, they walked back to the Rolls-Royce. They didn't look back. They didn't look back as Clara stood pregnant and alone in the driveway of the life that had just been stolen from her. The black car reversed, smoothly navigated the turn, and disappeared down the sun-drenched street, leaving only the scent of exhaust and shattered dreams. Clara stood there for an eternity, the $50,000 settlement, feeling like 30 pieces of silver. The sky so bright and cheerful, moments before, now seemed to mock her. Then the California sun betrayed her, and the sky opened up. A sudden, unseasonable downpour began soaking her hair, her dress, her soul, as she finally crumpled to the ground. The sound of her own heartbroken sobs, lost in the rhythm of the falling rain. The rain was relentless, plastering her thin silk blouse to her skin, the chill seeping deep into her bones. Clara didn't know how long she sat there on the wet asphalt of the driveway, her body shaking with a grief so profound it felt like a physical tearing. The $50,000 Marcus mentioned was a cruel joke. In a city where a shoebox apartment cost a fortune, it was a pittance, a dismissal. It was the price he had put on her, on their son. Her Range Rover, once a symbol of her comfortable life, now felt like a car. Where could she go? Her parents were gone, lost in a car accident 3 years prior. Her only living relative was a cousin in Oregon she hadn't spoken to in years. She had friends, yes, but they were their friends. Couples. They socialized with people enmeshed in Marcus's world of wealth and influence. To go to them would be to invite petty gossip and ultimately judgment. Except for one. Chloe. Chloe Jensen was her one true friend, a sharp-witted journalist she'd known since before Marcus was even in the picture. Chloe had never fully trusted him, always seeing a sliver of the narcissist beneath the charm. Clara pulled out her phone, her fingers clumsy and slick with rain. She found Chloe's number and pressed call. Ames. You okay? You sound awful. Chloe's voice was a lifeline. He kicked me out. Chloe. Clara sobbed the words tumbling out in a broken mess. He sold the house. He's with someone else. Isabella Vance. I have nowhere to go. There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a string of curses directed at Marcus that was both shocking and deeply comforting. Where are you right now? In the driveway. Stay in your car. Lock the doors. Text me the address. I'm coming. We'll figure this out. An hour later, Chloe's beat-up Honda Civic pulled up. Chloe, with her fiery red hair and fiercely loyal eyes, got out and ran to Clara's window, tapping on the glass. When Clara unlocked the door, Chloe pulled her into a fierce hug, ignoring the rain and the soaked designer clothes. We'll destroy him, Chloe said, her voice a low growl. Legally. Publicly. I don't care. But first, let's get you out of here. Chloe's apartment in Koreatown was a world away from Bel Air. It was small, vibrant, and cluttered with books and half-finished articles. It smelled of coffee and home. For the next 2 weeks, it was Clara's sanctuary. Chloe was a fierce guardian, fielding calls from Marcus's smarmy assistant and shielding Clara from the world. But the reality of her situation was a constant, crushing weight. The $50,000 wouldn't last. She needed a lawyer, an apartment, furniture, baby supplies. She was 6 months pregnant, visibly, so making the prospect of finding a job in her specialized field of art history next to impossible. Every night she'd lie awake on Chloe's sofa bed, her hands on her belly, whispering apologies to her unborn son for the chaotic world he was about to enter. Her name, once associated with high society, was now being dragged through the mud. Whispers started expertly leaked by Marcus's PR team. Clara was unstable. Her pregnancy had made her erratic and demanding. Marcus had been a long-suffering husband who had finally broken free. The narrative was twisting, painting him as the victim. The injustice of it was a bitter pill. One rainy Thursday, desperate for a change of scenery and a sense of normalcy, Clara decided to visit a small independent bookstore a few blocks from Chloe's apartment. She needed to be surrounded by stories by worlds other than her own miserable one. Clutching a worn copy of a book on Renaissance art, she was walking back to the apartment, huddled under a small umbrella that did little to stop the driving rain. Her mind was a million miles away, calculating expenses, imagining courtrooms, picturing Marcus and Isabella in her house. Distracted, she stepped off the curb at the same time a cyclist, head down against the weather, swerved to avoid a puddle. He crashed right into her. The impact sent her stumbling backwards. Her purse flew open, its contents scattering across the wet pavement. The book landed in a puddle. The tiny sneakers she'd bought for the baby, which she carried with her like a talisman, tumbled into the gutter. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry," the cyclist said, untangling himself from his bike. Clara was more stunned than hurt, but the sight of the tiny, soaked shoes was the final straw. All the pent-up fear, anger, and hopelessness surged to the surface. She sank to her knees on the sidewalk, uncaring of the grime and the rain, and began to sob, her shoulders heaving. She was vaguely aware of footsteps approaching. Heavy, expensive footsteps. "Are you all right, miss?" a deep voice asked. It was calm, controlled, and cut through the noise of the city. Clara looked up, wiping rain and tears from her eyes. A man stood over her, holding a large black umbrella that shielded them both from the downpour. He was impossibly tall, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than Chloe's car. His face was sharp and angular, with intense, dark eyes that seemed to see right through her. There was an aura of immense power and stillness about him. He looked like he owned the world and was currently unimpressed by it. A black limousine was idling by the curb, a chauffeur standing at attention. I'm fine," she lied, trying to gather her scattered belongings. Her hands were shaking too hard. The man knelt, his expensive trousers getting wet on the pavement, without a flicker of concern. He began picking up her things, her wallet, her keys, the lipstick that had rolled under a car. Then his hand hovered over the tiny mud-splattered sneaker in the gutter. He picked it up gently, his long fingers cradling it as if it were a fragile bird. He looked from the shoe to her swollen belly, and his expression, previously aloof and unreadable, shifted. It was a subtle change, a flicker of something she couldn't name. Recognition. Pity. "Let me help you," he said, his voice softer this time. It was a statement, not a question. He helped her to her feet, his grip on her elbow firm and steadying. "Where are you going?" Just an apartment." Around the corner, she mumbled, embarrassed by her state, by the fact that this powerful stranger was witnessing her at her absolute lowest point. "You're soaked through. You'll catch a cold." Let my driver take you." "No, I couldn't possibly." "I insist." He guided her towards the waiting limousine. The chauffeur opened the door, revealing an interior of plush cream leather that smelled of wealth and quiet success. It was a world she had once known, but now felt alien to her. She hesitated at the door. "I don't even know your name." He looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. "My name is Kai Carter." The name hit her like a physical blow. Kai Carter. He wasn't just a millionaire CEO. He was the millionaire CEO. The enigmatic, media-shy founder of Carter Enterprises, a global tech and investment firm that was a direct and fierce competitor to Thorn Legacy Corp. Marcus spoke of him with a mixture of fear and derision, calling him a ruthless shark. He was a legend in the business world, a man who had built an empire from nothing. "You're Kai Carter," she breathed. He confirmed, his expression unreadable. He looked at her again, a long, searching look. "And you are Clara Ellis, Marcus Thorne's wife." Her blood ran cold. Of course, he knew who she was. This wasn't a random act of kindness. This was something else. Was he gloating? Did he want to see his rival's cast-off wife in her moment of humiliation? Ex-wife. "Soon," she corrected him, her voice regaining a sliver of its former strength. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Carter, but I can manage." She turned to leave, but his next words stopped her dead. "Your father was David Ellis, the art curator," he said. It wasn't a question. She spun around, stunned. "How did you know that he was a good man?" "He gave me my first break, an internship at the museum when I was a student with nothing to my name. He believed in me when no one else did." He paused, his gaze softening with a memory. "I was very sorry to hear of his passing. I owe him a debt I can never repay." Clara was speechless. Her father had helped countless students, but she had never heard this story. "The debt is his, but the respect is mine to give to his daughter." Kai continued, his voice low and sincere. "Please, allow me to help you, not as a rival to Marcus Thorne, but as someone who respects the memory of David Ellis. Let me get you home, and let me give you the name of my personal lawyer. She is the best in the city. She will ensure you are not taken advantage of." Clara looked at this formidable man, the supposed shark of the corporate world. In his eyes, she didn't see a predator. She saw an unexpected and incredibly powerful ally. She thought of Chloe's small apartment, her dwindling bank account, the smug look on Isabella's face, and the tiny, ruined sneaker Kai was still holding. She had nothing left to lose. With a deep breath that was half surrender and half hope, she nodded. "Okay, Mr. Carter, I accept your help." As she slid into the warm, silent sanctuary of the limousine, she had no idea that this chance encounter on a rain-slicked street was not the end of her drama, but the beginning of a battle that would shake the foundations of two of the city's most powerful families. The limousine glided through the city traffic with an imperious silence. Clara sat on the plush leather cashmere blanket draped over her shoulders by the silent chauffeur. Kai Carter sat opposite her, not speaking, simply observing the city lights blur past the tinted windows. The silence wasn't awkward. It was charged, a space filled with unspoken questions. They didn't drive to Chloe's cramped apartment in Koreatown. Instead, the limousine pulled into the subterranean garage of one of the newest, most exclusive high-rises in Century City, the Carter Tower. It was Kai's flagship building, a sleek monolith of glass and steel that scraped the sky. Carter. "This isn't where I live," Clara said, a new wave of uncertainty washing over her. "I know," he replied, turning to her as the car came to a stop. "You cannot fight a war from a refugee camp. You need a fortress, and until you have your own, you will use one of mine." Before she could protest, he was leading her through a private elevator that opened directly into a sprawling penthouse. The space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 270-degree view of Los Angeles, the city lights a glittering carpet below. The furniture was minimalist and modern, a curated collection of art, a genuine Rothko on one wall, a Giacometti sculpture in a corner speaking to a sophisticated and discerning taste. It was luxurious, but unlike her former home with Marcus, it wasn't ostentatious. It was a place of quiet, confident power. "This is too much," she whispered, overwhelmed. "It is a temporary base of operations," Kai stated, walking towards the kitchen, which was a marvel of stainless steel and Italian marble. "There is a fully stocked kitchen, a concierge service downstairs for anything you need, and the security is absolute. No one gets up here without my express permission. You will be safe here. You and your son." He said it with such finality, such calm authority, that arguing seemed futile. He was offering her a gilded shield and a sword, and she knew she would be a fool to refuse. The next morning, as promised, Kai's lawyer arrived. She was nothing like the folksy, avuncular lawyers Clara had imagined. Evelyn Reed was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, a severe haircut, and a suit that looked like it was woven from steel. She carried a slim leather briefcase and exuded an aura of lethal competence. They sat at a large glass dining table overlooking the city. Clara, feeling small and underdressed in the simple maternity dress Chloe had helped her buy, recounted the entire story. The prenup she'd barely read, Marcus's sudden change in behavior, the affair with Isabella Vance, the sale of the house, the public humiliation. Evelyn Reed listened without interruption, her fingers steepled. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered something far more valuable: strategy. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad regarding premarital assets, like the house itself. Evelyn began, her voice crisp. Marcus's father's lawyers were very good. However, they made a critical error. They were arrogant. An error, Clara asked, leaning forward. They focused on protecting the initial asset, but they were sloppy regarding the appreciation of that asset during the marriage, and more importantly, the commingling of funds, Evelyn explained. You, Clara, contributed to the value of that home, not just through financial means, but through your role as his wife, hosting events, managing the property, and creating a home that enhanced his social and business standing. This is a recognized contribution. We can argue for a significant portion of the home's increased value. A sliver of hope ignited in Clara's chest. But that is the small game, Evelyn continued, a predatory glint in her eye. The real issue here is fraud. Fraud. He sold a marital home, or what can be argued as a marital home in spirit and function, without your consent. He claims you signed the papers. Did you know? Never. I would never have agreed to sell that house, not with the baby coming. Excellent, Evelyn said with a thin smile. He forged your signature. That is a felony. He also liquidated shared investment portfolios to fund his new life with Miss Vance, hiding the assets in offshore accounts. We've already begun tracking the transfers. Marcus thinks he's clever. He isn't. He's just a common cheat who happens to have a rich father. For the first time in weeks, Clara felt a surge of power. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a plaintiff. Over the next few days, the penthouse became a command center. Evelyn and her team of forensic accountants and investigators worked with terrifying efficiency. They subpoenaed bank records, real estate documents, and communication logs. Kai remained a distant but constant presence. He never intruded, but every evening he would call or send a brief text. "Are you comfortable? Do you need anything?" He arranged for a top prenatal nutritionist and a yoga instructor to visit her at the penthouse, ensuring her health and the babies were the top priority. One evening he joined her on the balcony. The air was cool and the city below was alive with light. "Why are you doing all of this?" Clara asked, her voice soft. "I know the story about my father and I'm grateful. But this is more than paying back a debt for an internship." Kai was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant Thorn Legacy Corp, building its logo, a proud, arrogant beacon in the skyline. "Your father gave me a chance," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But what you may not know is that my family also has a history with the Thorns. A long one." He turned to face her, his expression grim. "My father was a brilliant engineer. He co-founded a small tech firm with Marcus's father, Harrison Thorn, 30 years ago. They were partners, friends. My father developed a revolutionary patent that was set to make them both billionaires. But Harrison Thorn was a patient snake. He manipulated the contracts, pushed my father out, and stole the patent. He took everything. My father was ruined professionally and emotionally. He died a few years later of a heart attack, a broken man." Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She had never heard this story. The Thorns had always painted themselves as self-made titans. "I was a teenager when it happened." Kai continued, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "I watched my family lose everything. I vowed that day that I would rebuild what Harrison Thorn destroyed, and that one day I would be in a position to hold him and his legacy accountable. I have spent the last 15 years building Carter Enterprises to be bigger, stronger, and more innovative than anything the Thorns could ever imagine." He looked at Clara, his dark eyes filled with a fire she now understood. "Marcus's betrayal of you is not just a personal matter, Clara. It is a symptom of the Thorn family's rot. It's the same arrogance, the same cruelty, the same belief that they are above consequences. His mistake was that in his haste to discard you, he exposed himself, forging your signature hiding assets. These are crimes, and I will provide you with every resource necessary to see that justice is served, not just for you, but for my father as well." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a long-awaited reckoning. Clara was not a damsel in distress. She was the unwitting catalyst for a war between two dynasties. That night, Evelyn Reed delivered the first official salvo. A process server flanked by 2 imposing security guards walked into an exclusive Beverly Hills restaurant where Marcus and Isabella were celebrating their new life. In front of a room full of the city's elite, he served Marcus Thorn with a lawsuit that was breathtaking in its scope. It alleged fraud, forgery, illegal asset transfer, and infliction of emotional distress. It also filed an immediate injunction to freeze all of Marcus's known assets, personal and corporate, pending the investigation. The news report Chloe sent Clara later that night showed a photo of Marcus, his face pale with shock and fury, the legal documents clutched in his hand. Isabella stood beside him, her beautiful face a mask of disbelief and horror. The caption read, "Thorn heir sued by pregnant wife in explosive fraud case. In the quiet of the penthouse high above the city, Clara placed a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked a strong, reassuring movement. A small, determined smile touched her lips. The battle had just begun. The lawsuit landed like a bomb in the serene, manicured world of the Los Angeles elite. The story was irresistible, the cheating heir, the glamorous mistress, and the pregnant wife fighting back from the shadows with the backing of a mysterious, powerful benefactor. The narrative Marcus's PR team had so carefully crafted of the unstable, demanding wife was instantly obliterated, replaced by a far more compelling tale of betrayal and resilience. Marcus Thorne was not accustomed to being on the defensive. He and his family were used to controlling the story, to silencing problems with money and threats. But this was different. The asset freeze was a devastating blow, a logistical and public relations nightmare. Suddenly, his access to the endless well of Thorne family money was choked to a trickle. The credit cards he used to fund his lavish lifestyle with Isabella were declined. The planned renovations on their new house ground to a halt. Isabella Vance, whose attraction to Marcus was inextricably linked to his power and wealth, began to show the strain. The smug satisfaction was replaced by a nervous, shrewish energy. The romantic dinners were replaced by hissed arguments in the lobbies of hotels they could no longer afford. But the Thorne empire was old and formidable. And at its heart was a queen who would stop at nothing to protect her son and their legacy, Eleanor Thorne. Eleanor was a woman carved from ice with a smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. She saw Clara not as a wronged daughter-in-law, but as an existential threat, a commoner armed with a billionaire's weapon. She decided to handle the matter herself. One afternoon, as Clara was returning to the Carter Tower from a doctor's appointment, she was intercepted in the private garage. Eleanor Thorne stood waiting for her by the elevator, flanked by a severe-looking man who was clearly her personal security. Clara Eleanor said, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Eleanor," Clara replied, her heart pounding. She clutched her purse, her knuckles white. "My lawyer, Evelyn Reed, handles all communication." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Eleanor scoffed, stepping forward to block her path. "Lawyers are for business. This is family. I came here to appeal to your better nature." "My better nature?" Clara asked, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Where was Marcus's better nature when he forged my name and threw me out on the street?" Eleanor's smile tightened. "Marcus is a passionate man. He made a mistake. But you are blowing this far out of proportion. You have been given a generous settlement. What you are doing now, this vulgar public spectacle, is an embarrassment. You are embarrassing the father of your child. He embarrassed himself when he chose to commit fraud." Clara countered, amazed at her own steadiness. The safety of the penthouse and the strength of her legal team had forged a new spine of steel within her. Eleanor's facade of civility began to crack. "Let's be clear, you little gold digger. You married my son for his money, and now you're trying to extort him with the help of his biggest rival. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? Kai Carter is using you. He's a predator, and he will discard you the moment you are no longer useful in his pathetic war against my family. Kai has shown me more kindness and respect in 2 weeks than Marcus did in 5 years, Clara retorted. Kindness, Eleanor sneered. He has you locked up in this glass tower like a pet. You think this is freedom? You are a pawn in his game. A very foolish one. She took another step closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Drop this lawsuit. Take the money we are offering. We can make it a bit more for your trouble and disappear. Have your baby somewhere quiet. If you do not, I will personally see to it that you are destroyed. We will paint you as an unfit mother. We will prove you had an affair with Carter. We will drag your name through so much mud you'll never be clean again. We will fight for custody of that child, and I promise you a thorn will be raised by a thorn. You will not see a penny, and you will not see your son. The threat, so vile and direct, struck a primal fear in Clara's heart. The thought of losing her son was unbearable. For a moment she wavered. Just then the private elevator doors hissed open. Kai Carter stepped out. He had been in the security office watching the entire exchange on a monitor. He moved to stand beside Clara, his presence a solid, unshakable wall. He was taller than Eleanor's bodyguard, and his quiet intensity seemed to suck the air out of the garage. He looked down at Eleanor, his expression one of pure glacial contempt. "Eleanor," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "I heard your threats, as did the high-definition audio and video recorders in this garage. My legal team will be adding witness intimidation and coercion to the list of charges against your family." Eleanor Thorne, for the first time in her life, looked genuinely shocked. She paled. Furthermore, Kai continued taking a step forward as she instinctively took a step back. "If you or anyone associated with you ever comes within 500 feet of Ms. Ellis or her child again, I will unleash the full financial and legal power of my enterprise against yours. I will not just win a lawsuit. I will dismantle your legacy piece by piece. Your threat against her child has made this personal for me. Now get out of my building." His voice, though quiet, had the force of a command that could not be disobeyed. Eleanor, flustered and defeated, turned on her heel and practically fled to her waiting car. Upstairs in the penthouse, Clara was shaking, the adrenaline and fear finally catching up to her. Kai poured her a glass of water, his hand steady. "She meant it," Clara whispered. "She'll try to take my baby." "She will try," Kai corrected her gently. "But she will fail. The courts do not look kindly on adulterous fathers who commit fraud and whose families threaten pregnant women. Her threat was an act of desperation, Clara. It means we have them cornered." He was right, but Eleanor's attack opened up a new, uglier front in the war. True to her word, the Thorne PR machine went into overdrive. Tabloid articles appeared filled with anonymous sources who claimed Clara was mentally unstable. Photos of her and Kai, carefully edited to look more intimate than they were leaked. The narrative was clear. She was a scorned wife who had immediately jumped into the arms of a richer, more powerful man to exact revenge. The public pressure was immense. Every time she left the building for an appointment, she was hounded by paparazzi. The stress began to take a physical toll. Her blood pressure was elevated, and Dr. Hansen warned her that she needed to avoid stress at all costs for the health of the baby. The penthouse, once a sanctuary, started to feel like a cage again. Kai, seeing the toll it was taking on her, became a more constant, grounding presence. He would insist they eat dinner together, not to talk about the case, but about art, about books, about her dreams for her son. He would tell her stories about his own struggles, about building his company from the ground up. He was opening up to her, showing her the man behind the CEO persona. He discovered her love for painting a passion she'd abandoned when she married Marcus. One afternoon, she entered the penthouse's spare room to find it transformed into a fully equipped art studio with an easel, canvases, and every kind of paint she could imagine. "Evelyn says you need an outlet for the stress," he said, simply standing in the doorway. "My father's debt is repaid, Clara. My war with the thorns is my own. But helping you, that has become something different. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about seeing you and your son safe and happy." That evening, for the first time in years, Clara picked up a paintbrush. As she swept colors across the blank canvas, she wasn't painting away the pain. She was painting through it, finding a strength and a voice she thought she had lost forever. She was no longer just a pawn or a plaintiff. She was a creator, a mother, a survivor. And as the Thorns' empire raged outside her window, inside her fortress, she was finally starting to build her own. The legal battle stretched into the fall, a grueling war of attrition, fought through depositions, motions, and discovery requests. The Thorn family's legal team, a pack of high-priced corporate sharks, did everything they could to delay and obstruct. They filed motion after motion to have the asset freeze lifted, to dismiss the fraud charges, to discredit Clara as a witness. Evelyn Reed, calm and methodical, batted them away one by one. The turning point came during Marcus's deposition. The meeting was held in a sterile conference room in Evelyn Reed's downtown office. Clara was present on Kai's insistence. "You need to see this," he'd said. "You need to see him without his power." Marcus walked in, flanked by his lawyers. He looked thinner, his handsome face etched with strain. The swagger was gone, replaced by a brittle arrogance. He refused to look at Clara. Isabella Vance was nowhere in sight. The tabloids reported she had decamped to Europe, her loyalty fading as quickly as Marcus's bank accounts. Evelyn began calmly asking about his relationship with Clara, his business dealings, the sale of the house. Marcus answered with rehearsed, dismissive replies, sticking to the story that Clara had agreed to the sale and was now suffering from a case of seller's remorse, manipulated by Kai Carter. Then Evelyn changed tactics. "Mr. Thorn." "I'm placing before you Exhibit A," she said, sliding a document across the polished table. "This is the final sales agreement for your Bel Air property. Please turn to the last page." Marcus did so, his expression smug. "Yes, that's the document." "And that is your signature?" Evelyn asked. "It is. And underneath it, the signature of Clara Ellis. Did you see her sign this document?" "Yes, of course." Marcus lied, his voice firm. "She signed it in our home office on the evening of June 10th. That's a very specific memory," Evelyn noted. "What were you doing that evening?" "We were discussing our future, the need to downsize for a more family-focused life. It was all very amicable." Clara felt a surge of hot anger. She had been at a prenatal class that evening, a fact she had documented in her calendar, and Chloe could corroborate. Evelyn smiled, a tight, dangerous smile. "Thank you, Mr. Thorn. Now I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Albert Finch." She gestured to a man sitting quietly in the corner, whom Clara hadn't noticed before. "Dr. Finch is one of the country's leading forensic handwriting analysts. He has had access to dozens of samples of my client's signature from before this period, checks, letters, legal documents. Dr. Finch. Can you share your conclusion regarding the signature on Exhibit A?" Dr. Finch adjusted his glasses. "The signature of Clara Ellis on the sales document is a forgery. A competent one, but a forgery nonetheless. There are microscopic tells in the pressure and slant that are inconsistent with every known authentic sample. It was created by someone attempting to imitate her handwriting. Marcus's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. This is conjecture. It will be admissible testimony in a court of law, counsel, Evelyn said calmly. And perjury in a deposition is a serious offence, Mr. Thorne. Marcus's face had gone ashen. The confidence evaporated, replaced by naked panic. But that Evelyn continued leaning forward like a hawk, spotting its prey, is not your biggest problem. She slid another file across the table. It was thicker. This is not about just one house, is it, Marcus? This is about a pattern. Let's talk about the Thorne Legacy Corp's Phoenix Project. At the mention of the name, not only Marcus, but his entire legal team stiffened. It was clearly an internal confidential code name. The Phoenix Project. Evelyn elaborated, her voice cutting through the silence, is a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. For the last 3 years, you and your father have been systematically siphoning funds from Thorne Legacy Corp. into this entity under the guise of research and development. You've been devaluing the public company to prepare for a hostile takeover by yourselves. You plan to buy it back for pennies on the dollar, taking it private and cheating your shareholders out of billions. Marcus looked as if he'd been physically struck. Where did you... That's a lie. It's corporate espionage. It's not espionage when it's discovered through legal means. Kai Carter's voice cut in. He had been silent until now, a thundercloud in the corner of the room. He stood up and walked to the table. Your mistake, Marcus Kai, said, his voice low and lethal, was getting sloppy. When you forged Clara's signature, you created a criminal case. That gave us subpoena power that a simple civil divorce case would not. We were able to look into everything. And when we started pulling on the thread of the money you stole from your marital assets to hide in your personal offshore accounts, we found they were linked to a much, much larger web of accounts. Your Phoenix Project accounts. He laid a final document on the table. It was a wire transfer confirmation. And this is the real masterpiece. To cover your tracks, you moved money from the Phoenix Project accounts to buy out a tech patent from a smaller firm, a patent you needed to make the takeover work. But the bank that handled the transfer is a bank that Carter Enterprises happens to have a controlling interest in. Every transaction was flagged. We have it all. The transfers, the shell corporations, the falsified board minutes signed by you and your father. It's over. The room was utterly silent. Marcus Thorne stared at the papers, his face a mask of utter devastation. He wasn't just going to lose a divorce settlement. He was facing federal charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, securities fraud. Years, potentially decades in prison. He had not only destroyed his own life, but had brought down the entire house of Thorne his father had built on a stolen legacy. He finally looked at Clara. For the first time, she saw not a monster but a pathetic broken man, a boy who had been given everything and had destroyed it all through greed and arrogance. There was no triumph in her heart, only a profound, weary sadness. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply slumped in his chair, his head in his hands as his lawyers began a frantic whispered conference. The king had been checkmated. The empire had fallen. 2 weeks later, Clara gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. She named him David after her father. She was in a private suite at the city's best hospital, a suite Kai had arranged. He was the first person she called after Chloe. He came to the hospital not with the air of a victorious CEO, but with a quiet reverence. He looked at the baby asleep in Clara's arms, and a genuine, unguarded smile touched his face. "He looks like you," Kai said, softly. "He has your strength." The news of the Thorne scandal had exploded. Harrison Thorne was forced to step down as CEO amidst an SEC investigation. The company's stock plummeted. Marcus, in exchange for testifying against his own father, was negotiating a plea deal. The Thorne legacy, once a towering monument to power, was now a smoking ruin. Clara's settlement was swift and massive. She didn't take it from Marcus. There was nothing left to take. Evelyn Reed, on Kai's instruction, had structured a deal that made Clara a primary creditor in the corporate bankruptcy proceedings. Her settlement came from the liquidated assets of the corrupt empire that had tried to crush her. It wasn't alimony. It was justice. She was now an independently wealthy woman, her future and her son's future secured not by a man but by her own resilience. Holding her son, looking out the hospital window at the city skyline, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. The storm was over. The war was won. And from the wreckage, something new, something entirely her own, was just beginning to grow. Clara Ellis's journey took her from the heights of Bel Air to the depths of betrayal and back again, not to the life she lost, but to one she built herself. She walked through fire and emerged not burned but forged into a woman of incredible strength, a devoted mother, a talented artist, and the master of her own destiny. Marcus Thorne's greed and cruelty were the catalysts for his own downfall, a reminder that empires built on lies eventually crumble to dust. And Kai Carter, who started on a path of cold revenge, found an unexpected redemption in an act of kindness, healing old wounds by helping to create a new future. What did you think of Clara's incredible story of survival and justice? Do you believe the Thornes got what they deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Millionaire buys mistress luxury gifts. With pregnant wife's money, wife makes them both pay publicly. They were the couple everyone envied, wealthy, beautiful, and expecting their first child. The world saw Oliver and Charlene Cooper as the epitome of success, smiling at galas and making heartfelt speeches about family. Behind the scenes, however, a burning secret threatened to tear their carefully curated lives apart. Charlene's joy at soon becoming a mother was overshadowed by one devastating discovery. The luxury gifts her husband showered upon an elusive mistress were paid for with Charlene's own inheritance. Betrayal and scandal ignited a storm, and Charlene was prepared to fight back. But would she dare to expose Oliver, no matter the cost? Charlene Cooper was not just a socialite, she was the heiress to the Wilkerson real estate empire lineage that had solid footing in San Diego's property development sector for over 6 decades. The Wilkerson name was synonymous with old money, refined taste, and philanthropic work that spanned across California. Growing up, Charlene rarely heard a no. Her father, George Wilkerson, had doted on her, granting every request with a smile. Yet despite that gilded upbringing, Charlene carried a soft heart and a genuine desire to do good. When she met Oliver Cooper at a charity event in Los Angeles, their romance played out like a fairy tale. Oliver was a self-made businessman, known for an athletic build that hinted at his college football days and a confident smile that made him an instant crowd favorite. He had built a modest tech startup into a multi-million-dollar operation, impressing the city's financial elite. They fell in love fast, too fast, according to some cynics. But for Charlene, who believed in grand gestures and cosmic connections. Their whirlwind engagement and wedding felt like destiny. Marriage brought new joys and new pressures. Charlene found out she was pregnant 6 months into their union, while Oliver celebrated the news publicly, calling himself the luckiest man on earth. Charlene began to notice subtle shifts in his demeanor. He worked later hours, made strange phone calls from the balcony, and sometimes disappeared for business trips on painfully short notice. Charlene's close friend, Laura S. Wilkerson, a distant cousin who had married into another wealthy family, tried warning her that something felt off. But Charlene didn't want to believe Laura's suspicions. Not Oliver, her dream man, the one who had vowed to protect and cherish her. He couldn't possibly betray her. Yet tiny fractures were starting to form. On the day Charlene's pregnancy test came back positive, Oliver had seemed distracted. The typical euphoria of an expecting father lasted mere hours before he slipped out for a supposed investor meeting. Over the next weeks, she saw less of him than ever. The staff at their Beverly Hills mansion began whispering behind her back. Charlene wasn't oblivious. She was heartbroken, but too afraid of the truth to dig deeper. It was her father's unexpected passing that truly opened her eyes. George Wilkerson's death left Charlene with a sizable inheritance, enough for Oliver to realize that Charlene's pockets were even deeper than he had initially understood. Charlene, unaware of the lurking vultures, told Oliver she had come into a great deal of wealth. She wanted to donate a portion to a charity that supported homeless pregnant women, but Oliver suggested they wait to ensure stable cash flow for upcoming expansions. It sounded wise at the time, so Charlene agreed to hold off her philanthropic dream. Still, something nagged at her. She discovered unread emails, unaccounted for expenses, and hush-hush charges on their joint account labeled under consultancy fees. Worst of all, she found receipts from high-end boutiques like Hermes and Cartier, extravagant purchases that she had no memory of, and certainly had never received. The final straw came when an alert from her bank informed her that an enormous amount had been withdrawn to pay for a penthouse lease in downtown Los Angeles. This transaction screamed secrecy, and Charlene's entire body trembled with dread. In the quiet hours of early morning, as she felt her unborn child gently kick within her, Charlene realized she could no longer turn a blind eye. She had to uncover the truth, even if it shattered her heart and destroyed the man she once believed was her soulmate. In the days following her discovery, Charlene felt like an actress in a film noir, her every step cautious, her every smile forced. She needed answers, but she couldn't just walk up to Oliver and accuse him blindly. Instead, she decided to use the resources at her disposal. She hired a private investigator named Jackson Miller, a discreet figure with an impeccable reputation for uncovering hidden truths among Los Angeles's high-profile elite. Jackson, with his salt and pepper stubble and calm, analytical demeanor, met her at a quiet cafe in Westwood. They spoke in hushed tones as Charlene handed him the suspicious receipts and transaction records. He asked pointed questions about Oliver's habits, the times he'd come home late, any known associates he might confide in. Charlene listened to Jackson's methodology, a plan to track Oliver's movements, record his financial dealings, and dig into phone logs if necessary. Days turned into a week. Charlene stayed up at night, mind racing, imagining the worst possible scenarios. She told herself she might be overreacting, clinging to a slim hope that the transactions were for something innocuous, secret anniversary plans, perhaps. Yet her instincts told her otherwise. When Jackson finally called, Charlene's heart nearly stopped. Meeting him again at the same cafe, she arrived early, nerves buzzing. Jackson sat across from her, an empathy in his eyes that made her realize he'd done this many times before. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photographs of Oliver walking hand in hand with a striking brunette outside an exclusive boutique on Rodeo Drive. Another set of photos showed them picking out jewelry, with Oliver's arm confidently wrapped around the woman's waist. "She's Alexis Hart," Jackson said quietly, "a former runway model turned social media influencer. She has some moderate fame in the LA scene. She's known for her lavish lifestyle, usually financed by older, wealthy benefactors." Charlene's hands shook as she gripped the photos. The heartbreak was swift and brutal. She recognized the haute couture store in the background, places Oliver had never even invited her to. "There's more," Jackson added gently. "I discovered that the penthouse in downtown LA is in her name, but the payment route traces back to your inheritance account. I'm sorry. It was one thing to suspect a betrayal. It was another to see it displayed in undeniable proof. The pictures, the receipts, the joint property lease. Oliver was not just cheating on Charlene. He was using her father's money to do it. She felt her breath hitch, tears threatening to escape, but she forced them down. Charlene asked Jackson for everything: receipts, photos, timestamps. She paid him extra to collect any digital evidence he could find, from text messages to bank statements. If she was going to confront Oliver, she wanted an unassailable arsenal of facts. As she left the cafe, Charlene thought about her unborn child, the life forming within her. She recalled the day she had told Oliver the news. He had seemed so excited, so genuinely happy, yet how quickly that joy was overshadowed by this shameless affair. She realized she was no longer just a spurned wife. She was about to be a mother, and everything in her screamed that she had to protect her child from the toxic lies. Oliver brought into their home. That evening, Oliver returned late again. Charlene feigned sleep, carefully controlling her breathing so he wouldn't notice her tears or the heartache searing through her. As he tucked himself into bed, she felt the mattress shift with his weight, a weight that now felt heavier than ever. Deep inside, a new resolve began to form. Charlene would do whatever it took to ensure that justice was served, and she wasn't afraid to make it public if need be. Each passing day, the tension in the Cooper household intensified. Oliver acted more brazenly, sending text messages in Charlene's presence, stepping out for phone calls he labeled as urgent investor matters. A lesser woman might have confronted him immediately, brandishing evidence. But Charlene was no novice to power plays and feuds. She had observed enough corporate tussles in her father's company to know that timing was everything. In her father's study, a room lined with leather-bound books and old trophies, Charlene prepared her own strategy. Late one night, she laid out the evidence Jackson had collected: timelines, photos, and the sickening bank statements. She studied them like a general planning for war. She made sure to store duplicates safely with Laura Wilkerson, her trusted cousin, in case Oliver discovered her plans. Ironically, Oliver's behavior grew kinder during the day, as though he sensed her withdrawal. He started bringing her roses in an attempt to mask his guilt, or maybe to maintain the facade. He accompanied her to a routine prenatal checkup for the first time in weeks, acting every bit the devoted husband. The nurses at the clinic cooed over how lucky Charlene was to have such a supportive partner. The bitterness in her throat made it hard to swallow. One evening, Oliver suggested they dine at Spago in Beverly Hills, a place they often frequented during their courtship. Charlene agreed, thinking it might provide an opportunity to gauge his reactions. The hush of the Michelin-starred restaurant, the attentive waitstaff, and the candle-lit ambience all felt dreamlike. But beneath the surface, Charlene's anger simmered. Over foie gras and a meticulously prepared lamb dish, Oliver tried to discuss baby names. Charlene forced a smile, swirling her sparkling water while he sipped a vintage red. She asked him if everything was all right at work, if finances were stable. Oliver hesitated, quickly reassuring her that his tech ventures were thriving. "So we're still set on donating to that shelter project, right?" Charlene ventured, referencing her desire to support homeless, pregnant women. He coughed, face tight. "Yes, of course, but let's hold off until next quarter. I just need to ensure certain expansions go through." Charlene simply nodded, absorbing this new wave of deception. Her father's inheritance was being siphoned for Alexis Hart's penthouse and expensive tastes, yet Oliver continued to manipulate her philanthropic dreams. Back home, he went straight to shower, leaving his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. Charlene's heart pounded. She told herself she wasn't the type to invade privacy, but the truth was already out there. She was dealing with a man who had no qualms betraying her. Nerves tense, she picked up the phone, scrolling through messages. Most were harmless business chats, but one thread stood out: Alexis. She opened it, scanning a conversation that made her stomach twist. Alexis bragged about their penthouse, how the city view from the balcony at dawn was worth every cent, how she'd love a new Chanel bag to match the latest couture she'd posted on Instagram. Oliver's replies were full of heart emojis and promises to fulfill her every desire. A wave of nausea overtook Charlene, more intense than any pregnancy sickness she'd felt before. She barely managed to exit the screen and place the phone back before Oliver emerged. He kissed her on the cheek, his lips cold to her now. All she could do was force a painfully fake smile and wait for the next move. That night, sleep evaded her. Memories of happier times replayed in her mind, their honeymoon in Bora Bora, dancing under the stars at a friend's wedding, the day. Oliver surprised her with breakfast in bed just to see her smile. She clung to these fleeting good memories, mourning the reality that such love was probably never real to begin with. But she also felt the shift in her soul. The heartbreak was solidifying into anger, and the anger was transforming into an unwavering resolve. Charlene knew that if Oliver had the audacity to use her money to fund his mistress's lavish lifestyle, she owed it to her father's legacy and to herself to make them both pay, and not quietly. A few days later, Charlene found herself staring at Alexis Hart's social media profiles. The woman was stunning tall, with an enviable figure, sultry green eyes, and perfectly styled brunette waves. Her Instagram feed was a curated display of luxury, private jets, high-end restaurants, and designer clothes from Paris. She had close to 1 million followers, drawn to her constant parade of opulence and aspirational living. Charlene felt a cold detachment as she clicked through pictures of Alexis flaunting the diamond necklace Oliver had purchased. She recognized it from the receipts. A brand new photo had Alexis perched on a velvet chair inside the downtown penthouse. The skyline behind her, the caption read, "Home, sweet home, filled with love and endless possibilities." She scrolled through comments from adoring fans, many praising her glamorous lifestyle and inspirational success. The irony was nauseating. Charlene thought of the heartbreak behind those shimmering surfaces, the lies fueling Alexis's brand. Charlene's father's money that was meant to be used for philanthropic work was going straight into Alexis's pockets. Deciding to gather more intel, Charlene used a fake social media account to follow Alexis's stories. She was stunned to see a recurring cameo, Oliver's hand, the same gold watch she had given him on their wedding day. Sometimes Alexis's live videos captured the muffled sound of Oliver's voice in the background. They thought they were being subtle, but for Charlene, it was a direct punch to the gut. Shortly after, Charlene discovered that Alexis was scheduled to attend a fashion event in downtown Los Angeles. It wasn't a massive public show, more a private preview for wealthy potential buyers. Charlene secured an invite through a friend, deciding it was time to see Alexis in person. The event was held in a swanky gallery, lights dimmed to highlight the models gliding down a makeshift runway. Charlene arrived in a classic black sheath dress that hugged her small baby bump discreetly. Despite her turmoil, she emanated poise, her posture straight, her chin held high. She spotted Alexis near the front row, surrounded by admirers. The mistress was elegantly dressed in a gold sequined gown, accessorized with the exact diamond necklace Charlene had seen on Instagram. Her laugh tinkled through the air as she relished the attention. Charlene approached cautiously, not wanting to cause a scene. She pretended to admire a piece of couture on display until she was near enough to hear Alexis's conversation with a friend. They gossiped about men, parties, and brand sponsorships. Alexis boasted about how her man was more generous than any sponsor she had ever encountered. Charlene's stomach twisted in revulsion, but she maintained her composure. One glance at Alexis's face, and Charlene felt an overwhelming wave of empathy for herself, for the unborn baby, for the life she had believed in. Alexis, for all her glamorous facade, seemed cunning, but not necessarily formidable. She was a symptom, not the root cause. Charlene's ire was saved mostly for Oliver, the man who had orchestrated this entire betrayal. Still, Alexis wasn't innocent. She was knowingly involved with a married man, and even flaunting the spoils of that affair. Before Charlene turned to leave, Alexis's gaze slid over her. Their eyes locked for a moment. Alexis gave Charlene a fleeting glance, perhaps seeing her as another wealthy guest, and then looked away without a hint of recognition. There was a moment's temptation for Charlene to walk up and introduce herself as Oliver's pregnant wife, but she resisted. She had bigger plans. A public meltdown at a fashion event might have satisfied a lesser impulse, but Charlene needed a carefully crafted retribution, one that would leave both Oliver and Alexis reeling in the most public way possible. When Charlene stepped out into the brisk night air, she felt the baby kick. A soothing wave of maternal protectiveness coursed through her. "Don't worry," she whispered softly, placing a gentle hand on her belly. "Mummy's got this." Fueled by the injustices she'd discovered, Charlene began assembling a legal and social strategy. She reached out to her late father's trusted attorney, Deborah T. Carmichael, an older woman whose steely gaze and impeccable knowledge of the law had guided the Wilkerson family through countless high-stakes disputes. Sitting in Deborah's glass-walled office, Charlene laid out the situation. Deborah, with her silver hair pulled into a neat chignon, listened intently, occasionally leaning forward to examine the evidence Charlene provided. After a lengthy pause, she said, "We have grounds for a significant lawsuit, embezzlement of inheritance funds, possible misappropriation, the list goes on. But Charlene, you need to be ready for a brutal fight. Oliver might not back down easily, and your personal life will be under public scrutiny." Charlene took a deep breath, feeling a tremor course through her. "I need to do this, Deborah. I won't let him or that woman continue to siphon off what my father left behind. And I need to protect my baby." Deborah nodded, taking down notes. "We'll move forward carefully. I'll assemble a forensic accounting team. In the meantime, you need to keep a low profile, act like everything is normal at home. We don't want him suspecting we're onto him yet. Once we have a solid case, we'll confront him with it." Legal measures were only part of Charlene's plan. She had a more personal vendetta. She wanted Oliver and Alexis to face the consequences on a social platform. After all, Oliver thrived on maintaining a polished public image as a philanthropic millionaire, and Alexis, her entire career hinged on her glamorous, envy-inducing social media persona. Charlene resolved to strike them where it would hurt the most, in public reputation. A stroke of inspiration led Charlene to her father's old diaries, which she discovered tucked away in a carved mahogany chest. George Wilkerson had meticulously recorded notes about people he did business with, favors, secrets, alliances. Reading through them, Charlene was reminded how alliances could be forged or broken with a single phone call. She discovered a longtime ally of her father's, Mark Remington, a prominent journalist with the Los Angeles Tribune. Mark and George had teamed up once to expose a crooked real estate mogul. The subsequent scandal had garnered front-page headlines, and Mark owed his career boost to George. Charlene wasn't sure if Mark would remember her, but she decided to find out. She called the Tribune, leaving a message explaining that she was George Wilkerson's daughter and needed to speak with Mark. Within an hour, she got a call back. Mark's voice was warm with reminiscence as he recounted how much her father had supported him. After exchanging pleasantries, Charlene offered Mark an exclusive story that would expose betrayal, financial misuse, and the lavish downfall of a prominent tech millionaire. Mark hesitated. "This is about Oliver Cooper, isn't it? I've seen him around, and he's something of a rising star in the business section. Are you certain you want to go public?" Charlene's throat tightened. "I'm certain, but I need your promise that this will be handled with integrity. This isn't just gossip, it's about justice and ensuring no one else gets hurt." Mark agreed to meet in person, requesting a time and place. They settled on a discreet cafe near the Tribune's office. As Charlene hung up, she felt a surge of adrenaline. It was one thing to plan revenge quietly, but quite another to involve a well-known journalist who had the power to break a career. In those days of preparatory hush, Charlene found small comfort in her unborn child's growing kicks. She allowed herself moments of calm, sometimes drifting to the nursery she had started decorating. She would stand there in the soft glow of pastel paint, letting her imagination wander to a future free from Oliver's deceit. Yet every time she saw Oliver, her resolve hardened. One late night, she heard him chatting on the phone in hushed tones, finishing with "I miss you too," before ending the call. The next morning, he cheerfully asked if she needed anything for her prenatal vitamins. The audacity left her speechless, but it also reaffirmed her mission. She would not remain a helpless victim. Oliver Cooper was not a man who ever considered himself the villain. Born to modest means in Sacramento, he had clawed his way up, starting with a partial football scholarship that got him through college. When an injury ended his sports dreams, he discovered a knack for sales and networking. He joined a tech startup, impressing investors with his bold pitches and near-fearless approach. Over time, he built his own enterprise, Cooper Innovations, attracting venture capital, forging partnerships, and eventually becoming a darling of the tech press. He prided himself on defying expectations. To Oliver, life was a game of strategy, and he believed that moral lines were negotiable if the end justified the means. Meeting Charlene Wilkerson seemed like the perfect alignment of business and pleasure. He was genuinely drawn to her kindness and sophistication, but he was also captivated by the resources she possessed. Their relationship skyrocketed his social standing. Her father's connections opened doors that would have remained locked for years. However, Oliver's appetite for success proved insatiable. He was enthralled by the power he wielded and the attention he could command, especially from women who admired his status. The day he set eyes on Alexis Hart at a high-end nightclub, desire and opportunity collided. He was bored with the predictability of marriage, or so he told himself, and Alexis represented the spark he craved. But Alexis demanded more than mere attention. She wanted designer bags, exclusive penthouse living, and the feeling of being kept by a wealthy lover. Initially, Oliver believed he could handle the financial burden. His ventures were doing well, after all. But soon, Alexis's cravings escalated. She wanted a place bigger than her old condo. She wanted jewelry that would stand out on her Instagram feed. Oliver found ways to sneak money out of joint accounts, forging invoices and funneling funds. When the news of Charlene's inheritance landed, Oliver saw a stopgap solution to maintain Alexis's extravagant tastes until he could close a few major tech deals. It was a gamble, but in his mind, he had it under control. He had no qualms about forging Charlene's signature on certain transactions or convincing her that the funds were tied up in essential expansions. He believed Charlene would never suspect. She was gentle, trusting, and occupied with her pregnancy. Little did he know, behind Charlene's calm demeanor lay the iron will of George Wilkerson's daughter. One afternoon, as he sipped a whiskey at a private lounge, Oliver scrolled through Alexis's latest Instagram photos. His chest puffed with pride at the thought of having such a dazzling woman by his side, albeit in secret. Alexis's messages demanded a new Hermes Birkin bag she had spotted. Oliver texted back with reassurance, hoping she'd remain satisfied for a while longer. Within a few minutes, Charlene called. Oliver almost didn't answer, but something in her voicemail, "We need to talk about something important," made him pick up. She requested he come home early for dinner, sounding sweet yet firm. Oliver felt a prickle of uncertainty. Charlene rarely insisted on altering his schedule, but he brushed it off, thinking perhaps she wanted to share some baby-related development. Oliver had no clue that the carefully laid trap was about to snap shut around him. He still believed he was the master of his own destiny, orchestrating two separate worlds without consequence. What he failed to realize was that his illusions were hanging by a thread, and Charlene held the scissors. Charlene decided the moment had come to set her plan in motion. With Deborah T., Carmichael's legal advice, and the mountain of evidence courtesy of Jackson Miller's investigations, she was ready to confront Oliver. She'd been hiding her fury behind sweet smiles for too long, and every day that passed felt like a betrayal of her own soul. It was a Monday evening when Oliver walked into their Beverly Hills mansion, expecting a quiet dinner. Instead, he found Charlene sitting in the living room, dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue blouse, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. On the table before her lay two neatly stacked piles of papers and a laptop. Oliver frowned, loosening his tie. "What's all this?" he asked, forcing a chuckle. "You look serious." Charlene gestured for him to sit. "We need to talk, Oliver. Please." He obliged, though she could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. Charlene opened the laptop, revealing photos of Oliver and Alexis shopping together, arms wrapped intimately. A slideshow advanced to screenshots of text messages, receipts from her inheritance account, and finally, the penthouse lease documents. She didn't have to say a word. The evidence spoke for itself. Oliver's face went pale. He attempted a laugh, nervous and hollow. What is this? Where did you get these?" Charlene's voice was steady, surprising even herself. "That's not the question you should be asking. You should be asking why you thought you could use my father's money to fund your mistress's lavish lifestyle." Oliver blanched, standing up in an attempt to regain control. "Let's calm down. This is a misunderstanding." Charlene rose too, a hand instinctively resting on her pregnant belly. "Don't you dare feed me that lie. I've traced every cent you took from my inheritance. I've hired a private investigator. My lawyer, Deborah Carmichael, has drawn up the legal consequences of your actions. Everything is right there." She pointed at the second stack of papers documents that outlined a potential lawsuit for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of trust. Oliver tried to speak, but he choked on his words, finally managing a feeble apology. "I never meant to hurt you. I just needed time. I was going to replace the money." His excuses sounded pitiful, even to himself. Charlene's eyes flashed with anger. "My father's money was meant for charity, Oliver. And if that wasn't enough, you brought another woman into our marriage. I'm pregnant with your child, and this is how you repay me." He stepped forward, arms outstretched, but Charlene recoiled. "Don't," she warned, her tone sharper than ever before. For a moment, guilt and panic flooded his face. He started to stammer. "We can fix this. I'll leave her, pay you back. It was just a mistake, a fling." Charlene's hollow laugh cut through his words. "A fling that cost me millions of dollars and my trust. Don't you dare trivialize this." Oliver looked around helplessly, scanning the room like a trapped animal. He saw the unwavering determination in Charlene's posture and realized how dire his situation truly was. She wasn't the naive, trusting heiress he'd married. She was George Wilkerson's daughter, a woman with the resources and willpower to ruin him. Before Oliver could plead further, Charlene handed him an envelope. Inside was a formal letter from Deborah's firm outlining Charlene's conditions: immediate return of all misused funds, complete severance from Alexis Hart, and an agreement that if Oliver didn't comply, Charlene would file a lawsuit and expose him publicly. Oliver's hands shook as he read. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead. He tried to muster defiance, but the weight of Charlene's evidence and the potential fallout was immense. If the press got hold of this, his business could collapse, investors might bail, and his once venerated public image would be shattered. Swallowing hard, he finally spoke in a subdued voice. "I'll do what it takes. Just give me a chance to fix this." Charlene didn't respond, her glare cold enough to freeze him in place. Then she stood, taking one final look at the man she once believed was her life partner. Without another word, she left the room, the quiet click of her heels echoing in Oliver's ears. The once invincible entrepreneur sank into the nearest chair, realizing the gravity of what he had done. His illusions were no more. The facade lay in pieces around him. Word traveled fast in certain circles, especially among the wealthy. Alexis Hart sensed something was off the moment. Oliver declined to accompany her to a high-profile after-party. He had always jumped at the chance to show her off, to revel in the attention their illicit romance garnered. Now he was distant, texting her curt replies that lacked his usual over-the-top affection. Their next face-to-face encounter took place at the penthouse Oliver funded. Alexis had arranged a private chef to cook dinner, hoping to create a romantic ambiance. She lounged in a silk robe, sipping champagne while she waited. But when Oliver arrived, tense and brooding, the sparks she usually felt fizzled into concern. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice sultry but tinged with worry. Oliver paced the room, ignoring the tantalizing smell of garlic and rosemary wafting from the kitchen. He finally turned to her. "Charlene found out," he said simply, face drawn. Alexis's eyes widened. She'd always feared this day might come, but she had grown complacent, believing Oliver had it all under control. "So what? You can smooth things over, right?" He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "It's worse than that. She's threatening legal action and public exposure. I could lose everything, my company, my reputation. She wants the money back, Alexis. Millions of dollars." Alexis's mouth fell open. She was not just an idle bystander in this drama. If Oliver's finances were frozen or compromised, she'd lose the lifestyle she'd grown to love. "What about me?" she demanded, voice sharp with panic. "We have a lease here. Is she shutting that down too?" Oliver nodded grimly. "Yes, she wants me to cut ties immediately." Alexis's lip curled in frustration. She had no intention of giving up her penthouse or the benefits she reaped from being Oliver's mistress. She'd invested time in him, in their brand of secrecy, and she wasn't about to watch it vanish. "Then fight her," Alexis snapped. "Hire the best lawyers. She can't just ruin your life because of a marital spat." Oliver laughed bitterly. "Marital spat? You don't understand. She has evidence of misappropriating her inheritance. She can press charges. The court will side with her, and I'll be labeled a thief." Alexis's expression hardened. Fear and anger churned within her. "You told me you had this under control, that your marriage was more of a facade, and you could get the money whenever you wanted." He flinched. "It's complicated, Alexis. Charlene's father was a powerful man, and she inherited not just money, but influence. People are lining up to help her, and she's pregnant with my child. Even the optics of that are damning for me. Something unreadable flickered in Alexis's eyes, perhaps a momentary guilt. Then, just as swiftly, it was replaced by self-preservation. What do you plan to do? Beg her forgiveness? Maybe you should just divorce her. Then we can finally be together openly. Oliver glared at her, frustration welling up. Don't you get it? A divorce would be a nightmare right now. She'd drag me through the courts, and I'd lose all support from my investors. They don't want to be associated with scandal. And with the baby on the way, she'd get sympathy, and I'd be a pariah. Alexis sighed, sinking onto the tufted velvet couch. Fine, you handle the legal mess. But don't expect me to sit around waiting. I have to protect my own interests. Oliver stared at her, realization dawning that Alexis's devotion was as conditional as her lifestyle was extravagant. He had hoped for support, maybe an embrace that would ease his anxiety. Instead, her cold practicality only underscored the fact that she was with him for what he could provide. I can't keep funding everything, he admitted, voice weary. Charlene wants the money returned. I'll try to stall, but eventually I have to close deals to pay back what I took. Alexis's expression darkened at the suggestion that the money flow might stop. She rose, crossing her arms. You'd better figure out a way to fix this, Oliver. I'm not going back to some dingy apartment or giving up the lifestyle I've built. If you let her win, you'll lose me too. Her ultimatum hit him like a slap. He realized that in his quest for success and pleasure, he'd bound himself to two demanding women, one with legitimate moral and legal standing, and the other with a voracious appetite for luxury. As Alexis retreated to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her, Oliver sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. In that moment, he felt the walls closing in. There was no easy path forward. If he complied with Charlene, Alexis would likely walk away, leaving him high and dry. If he fought Charlene, he risked public disgrace and possible legal ruin. Faced with these impossible choices, Oliver finally understood that his empire built on lies and grand illusions was on the brink of collapse. While Oliver floundered, Charlene assembled a circle of support that fortified her resolve. She confided in Laura Wilkerson, her trusted cousin and friend, who offered emotional solace and practical help. Laura connected Charlene with a public relations consultant, Samantha Layton, well known for handling high-profile scandals. Samantha had a polished demeanor, her every word measured as she addressed Charlene's concerns in her sleek downtown office. Your story is compelling, Samantha noted, scanning the summary of Charlene's predicament. A pregnant heiress, betrayed by her husband, who used her inheritance to spoil a mistress. It's headline gold, but we must manage the narrative carefully, or it could spiral out of control. Charlene nodded. I don't want to be seen as vindictive, but I need justice, and I won't stand by while my father's legacy is exploited for someone else's greed. Samantha offered a small smile. Understood. We'll position you as a woman standing up for her unborn child's future and safeguarding charitable interests. This is about more than revenge, it's about principle. Meanwhile, Deborah Carmichael was finalizing the legal angle. She arranged a meeting with Oliver's lawyers to present Charlene's demands: immediate repayment of the stolen funds, a transfer of any assets purchased with her inheritance back to her name, and a formal separation agreement that protected Charlene from any further financial wrongdoing. If Oliver refused, a lawsuit would proceed. Charlene was also preparing for her clandestine meeting with Mark Remington, the journalist. She knew that if Oliver tried to strong-arm her or manipulate public sentiment, she would have an ally in the press. Late one afternoon, she slipped on a simple beige trench coat, pulled her hair into a low ponytail, and headed to a small cafe near the Los Angeles Tribune's office. Mark Remington was already seated at a corner table, nursing a cappuccino. He stood when he saw her, greeting her with a warm handshake. Charlene recognized the lines of age and experience around his eyes, a testament to his years in investigative journalism. They spoke in subdued tones, Charlene handing him sanitized versions of the evidence photos, financial documents, text message screenshots. Mark skimmed through them, occasionally raising an eyebrow. "This is thorough," he remarked. "If this goes public, Oliver Cooper's reputation will take a massive hit, possibly irreversible." Charlene exhaled shakily. "I'm aware. I don't relish destroying him, but he left me no choice. I won't let him or his mistress keep benefiting from my father's legacy." Mark leaned in, eyes earnest. "I'll do this story justice. I owe your father a lot, and I respect you for how you're handling this. Just be prepared. Once it's out there, you can't control every headline." Charlene nodded. She knew the risk, but it was one she was willing to take. In the days that followed, Charlene continued her routine as if nothing were amiss. She attended prenatal yoga sessions, visited her doctor, and occasionally appeared at society luncheons. Yet beneath the surface calm, she was orchestrating the downfall of the man who had wronged her. Oliver sensed her quiet determination, and it made him restless. He spent hours on the phone with potential investors, desperate to secure funds to repay Charlene. But rumors started swirling that Oliver Cooper was in financial trouble, and potential backers grew wary. Alexis grew impatient too. She posted cryptic messages on social media about undying love, turning into betrayal, likely aimed at stirring sympathy. But the more her followers asked questions, the more Alexis retreated into cryptic silence, perhaps realizing that Charlene's wrath could explode any day now. And so the stage was set. Charlene stood, strong and resolute, armed with legal, PR, and journalistic firepower. Oliver flailed between desperation and denial, while Alexis feared losing her golden goose. The world outside remained oblivious for the moment, but soon the carefully constructed illusions would crumble in a blaze of public scandal. Charlene could almost taste the retribution, and she knew it would be served cold. The unraveling began on a crisp Wednesday morning when the Los Angeles Tribune ran a front-page teaser: high-profile tech entrepreneur accused of misusing wife's inheritance. Though the article did not name Oliver directly, those in elite circles recognized the clues pointing to Cooper innovations. Within hours, social media started buzzing. The cryptic references matched rumors of Oliver's recent desperation to secure funds, and the name Charlene Wilkerson Cooper trended on local Twitter feeds. Paparazzi camped outside their mansion, trying to capture the first shots of the wealthy heiress at the center of the scandal. Oliver woke to a barrage of phone calls and texts from colleagues, investors, and even relatives who had read the story. He rushed downstairs, where Charlene calmly sipped tea at the dining room table, a copy of the Los Angeles Tribune laid out next to her plate. "What did you do?" he demanded, voice hoarse. She met his gaze unflinching. "I gave them the truth," she said simply. He inhaled sharply. "You've put my entire company at risk. Do you know how this makes me look?" Charlene stood, her pregnant belly prominent beneath her blouse. "Yes, I do. And you're the one who put us here. Now it's time to face the consequences." Oliver shook his head in disbelief. Before he could say more, his phone rang again. He retreated to his study, slamming the door behind him. Charlene could hear his muffled voice, shouting something about media spin and damage control. By midday, a second wave of online articles appeared, some even naming Alexis Hart as a possible mistress. Alexis's Instagram followers flooded her posts with questions. Instead of responding, Alexis turned off comments, fueling further speculation. Soon, national gossip columns picked up the story, hungry to showcase a salacious tale of betrayal and scandal. Charlene's phone buzzed incessantly with messages of support from friends and family, plus the occasional harassing call from curious strangers. Laura Wilkerson came by to check on Charlene, offering to help manage the chaos. Meanwhile, Samantha Layton, Charlene's PR consultant, was busy issuing statements. Mrs. Cooper prioritizes her unborn child's well-being and is cooperating fully with legal proceedings to reclaim misused funds. She remains committed to charitable initiatives, despite the challenging circumstances. Investors in Cooper Innovations began to panic. Some threatened to pull out if Oliver did not address the allegations immediately and clear his name. Desperate to salvage his company, Oliver arranged a press conference for the following day at a luxury hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Charlene stayed silent that evening, ignoring Oliver's attempts to discuss strategy. She retired to the nursery, gently running her hands over the crib she had picked out weeks ago, her mind replaying the chain of events that led them to this precipice. Though she felt a twinge of sorrow for the public nature of the scandal, her conviction held firm Oliver had to be held accountable. That night, the media frenzy exploded. Popular talk shows hosted panels discussing the riches to rags angle, speculation about prenups, and the morality of Oliver's actions. On one late-night show, a comedian quipped, "Misusing your pregnant wife's inheritance to fund a mistress?" In LA, that's like trying to swim with sharks while bleeding. Bad idea. Charlene went to bed early, telling herself that tomorrow would be the beginning of the end. As she switched off the lights, she felt the baby kick and whispered a promise to her child, "This chaos won't define us. I'll make sure of it." Outside, the press huddled in clusters, cameras flashing whenever a light turned on in the windows. Inside, the once luxurious fortress felt like a cage of secrets and sorrow. And somewhere across town, Alexis Hart watched her phone, dread filling her heart as she realized she was not merely a bystander, she was about to be publicly named and shamed as well. The next morning, Oliver stood behind a podium in the opulent ballroom of the Regency Hotel. He wore a tailored suit, trying to project calm authority, yet his hands shook as he adjusted the microphone. Rows of reporters, photographers, and camera crews filled the space, waiting to broadcast his statement live. Charlene opted not to attend in person. Instead, she watched the live stream from the comfort of her father's study, with Laura by her side. It wasn't her place to shield Oliver from the consequences. This was his mess. Clearing his throat, Oliver began, "I'd like to address the recent allegations circulating in the media. First, I want to make it clear that I have the utmost respect for my wife, Charlene Cooper, and her family legacy. Any suggestion that I have intentionally misappropriated funds is premature and not based on the full facts." His speech was carefully scripted, peppered with phrases like misunderstanding and temporary financial reallocation. He dodged direct mention of Alexis Hart, only vaguely referring to private matters that do not concern the public. Reporters unleashed a flurry of questions. "Is it true you used your wife's inheritance for personal gain? Have you been unfaithful to your wife, who is pregnant with your child? What about the penthouse property leased in Alexis Hart's name?" Oliver's calm facade began to crack. He tried to deflect, insisting that no wrongdoing occurred, but the wave of skepticism was overwhelming. The final straw came when a tenacious reporter from a local affiliate stood up and said, "We have documents showing your signature authorizing transfers from your wife's inheritance to fund the lease of Miss Hart's penthouse." "Care to comment?" Oliver stammered. The entire ballroom seemed to collectively hold its breath. Finally, he mumbled, I have no comment on Miss Hart's personal finances. Camera shutters clicked frantically, capturing the moment. Online, viewers mocked him on social media for his non-denial. Memes sprouted, picturing Oliver's sweaty brow next to the tagline, "No comment." From the study, Charlene watched, feeling an odd mix of triumph and sadness. This was the father of her child, after all, and seeing him humiliated publicly was bittersweet. But she reminded herself of the betrayal, the stolen money, and the mistress. Actions had consequences, and Oliver was finally facing his. After the press conference, Oliver fled the hotel amidst jeering questions. His phone lit up with missed calls and messages from business partners. He tried calling Charlene, but she didn't pick up. When she finally checked her messages, there was one tearful voicemail from Oliver, begging for a chance to talk. She ignored it, letting her lawyer Deborah handle all formal communications. News coverage that evening was brutal, with every network dissecting Oliver's shaky performance. Some panelists predicted a swift downfall for Cooper Innovations. Stocks tied to his ventures took a hit as anxious investors bailed. Meanwhile, tabloids emblazoned images of Alexis, dredging up her modeling past and speculation about her connection to Oliver. At a small bar on the outskirts of town, Alexis Hart watched the broadcast with a sinking feeling. A friend tapped her shoulder sympathetically, but Alexis shrugged it off, her mind whirling. She realized her chance of forging a respectable public image was slipping away. She cursed Oliver for his failure to control the narrative. In the hours that followed, Charlene received a supportive call from Mark Remington at the Los Angeles Tribune. "Well, that was quite the show," he remarked. "Are you satisfied?" Charlene sighed. "It's not over yet, but this is the start of him taking responsibility. Thank you for exposing the story with integrity, Mark." He wished her well, and Charlene ended the call, sinking back into the leather chair in her father's study. Laura squeezed her hand, offering a gentle smile. "You did the right thing," Laura said. "Your father would be proud." Exhausted, Charlene allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. She knew she was forever changed by this ordeal, but as she stroked her belly, she silently vowed that her child's life would be built on honesty, love, and dignity, everything Oliver had so woefully betrayed. In the wake of Oliver's disastrous press conference, Alexis Hart found herself at the center of a spiraling scandal. Hounded by trolls and abandoned by sponsors, she hid in the penthouse, watching her once glamorous life crumble. She repeatedly called Oliver, but he offered no solutions. His resources were now diverted to crisis management. Desperate, Alexis agreed to an exclusive tabloid interview, hoping to salvage her reputation. Her plan backfired spectacularly. She stumbled over her lies, contradicting herself on camera and exposing how deeply she'd known about Charlene's inheritance. The public turned on her, mocking her attempts at portraying herself as a victim. Brands cut ties, and her agent dropped her altogether. Realizing she had lost her golden ticket, Alexis packed up the designer items Oliver had bought her. With a final, scornful text to him, "I'm done. Good luck with your mess." She fled Los Angeles, leaving behind a ruinous legacy as the mistress who fell from grace. With Alexis gone, Oliver found himself cornered, facing a wife armed with an army of attorneys and a brewing lawsuit that threatened to dismantle his entire empire. Deborah T. Carmichael finalized the formal complaint, detailing every instance of financial misappropriation. The documents demanded full restitution, punitive damages, and legal fees. Charlene sent Oliver a final ultimatum through Deborah: settle out of court under these terms or face a very public trial. The settlement terms included: 1. Immediate transfer of any remaining misused funds back to Charlene's account. 2. Liquidation of certain Cooper Innovations assets to repay her inheritance. 3. A public apology and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. 4. an agreement that Charlene would maintain full custody of their unborn child, with Oliver having supervised visitation unless future court orders stipulated otherwise. Oliver balked at the custody demand, but even he recognized he had no leverage left. His name was mud in the media, investors were distancing themselves, and every day brought new rumors about potential lawsuits from minority shareholders who felt misled. At a final negotiation session, Oliver arrived looking haggard, dark circles under his eyes, his once confident posture deflated. Charlene sat across a mahogany table, Deborah by her side. The tension in the air was palpable. "What do you want from me?" Oliver asked, voice hollow. "My company is in shambles. I can't magically produce millions overnight." Charlene stared at him, remembering the charming suitor who once vowed eternal devotion. That man was gone, replaced by a shell. "Figure it out," she replied coldly. "Sell your shares. Downsize operations, do whatever it takes. I'm not responsible for your choices." Oliver's eyes flickered with a mixture of shame and desperation. He turned to Deborah, attempting to negotiate the custody terms, but Charlene stood firm. "My child will not be subjected to your toxic lifestyle. Earn the right to be in their life again." Deborah slid the settlement papers across the table. Oliver took a shaky breath and scribbled his signature. The weight of finality descended on the room. From her seat, Charlene tried to steady the tremor in her hand. She had envisioned a different future, a family united, love thriving, but life had taken a cruel turn. Outside the firm's office, paparazzi snapped photos, capturing Oliver's defeated expression. He muttered a short no comment before ducking into a waiting car. Charlene followed after some moments, her composure intact. She had just won a crucial victory, but her heart felt heavy. Still, she reminded herself that this step was necessary to secure her baby's future. The stolen inheritance would be reclaimed, Oliver would be forced to atone, and the public had seen the truth of his betrayal. As the legal dust began to settle, Charlene could see the road ahead, one that involved single motherhood, healing, and rebuilding her life free from deceit. Now, only the final chapter remained, turning this painful saga into something meaningful, not just for her, but for the causes her father cared about. Charlene intended to ensure that out of the ashes of this scandal, a brighter, more hopeful legacy would shine. With the legal battles behind her, Charlene left the Beverly Hills mansion, unable to face its haunting memories. Instead, she found comfort in a smaller Ocean View penthouse. There, she poured her reclaimed inheritance into something meaningful, the George Wilkerson Sanctuary for Mothers. Housed in a restored downtown building, it offered safe shelter, medical care, and job training for expectant women in need. At the sanctuary's opening ceremony, Charlene stood before a modest crowd. Months of scandal and heartbreak had led her here, but she felt more empowered than ever. She publicly honored her late father's legacy, vowing that the foundation would extend hope to those most vulnerable. Oliver Cooper, left reeling by his downfall, sold off parts of Cooper Innovations to repay what he'd taken. He sent Charlene a letter admitting regret and asked to see their child someday. She didn't respond immediately. Trust would take time to rebuild, if ever. Eventually, Charlene welcomed a healthy baby girl, Georgina, named after her father. Holding her daughter in the hospital's soft morning light, Charlene was filled with renewed hope. She had survived betrayal and public scrutiny, emerging with a clear purpose to raise her child in a world guided by honesty, compassion, and her father's enduring spirit. And so ends the tumultuous tale of wealth, betrayal, and justice. Charlene's world was turned upside down when her husband, Oliver, funneled her inheritance into a luxury lifestyle with his mistress, Alexis. Yet, through heartbreak, legal warfare, and a media storm, Charlene found her resolve. She reclaimed not just her father's legacy, but her own power and dignity. Oliver and Alexis paid the ultimate price, public humiliation and shattered reputations, forced to face the consequences of their selfish desires. Charlene emerged stronger, dedicating her restored fortune to a cause that honored her father's memory. Even as a single mother, she found purpose in nurturing new life, her baby girl, Georgina, and helping vulnerable mothers in need. This story reminds us that while betrayal can strike like a thief in the night, resilience and truth can vanquish even the darkest lies.